Welcome to A Moment of Bach, where we take our favorite moments from the composer's vast musical output, just a minute's worth or even a few seconds, and show you why we think they are remarkable. We're your hosts, Alex and Christian Giebert, and today's moment on this Monday of Holy Week is an aria from the St. John Passion, movement number 32, Mein teurer Heiland.
Stillschweigend, ja, doch neigest du das Haupt und sprichst stillschweigend, ja.
Freeze frame is the term that conductor and Bach author and scholar John Eliot Gardiner uses to describe the arias of the Passions. For the St. John Passion, he notes that Bach is mostly linear in the way he progresses through the Gospel of John. Mostly linear. There are interesting exceptions like how he interpolates a few verses from Matthew. But besides that, it really moves until there's an aria. And the arias are the longest parts, and the arias are more reflective. But instead of dragging the thing out or making all of the momentum stop, the arias are frozen. The arias are freeze frames. In some cases, they are our reaction. It's almost cinematic. You could imagine a shot stopping, time stopping even, while we walk through the scene and explain what it means to us. In some cases, we are questioning what it means with actual questions, and that is what we have here. If you listened to our episode last week, you heard how Bach develops the idea of it is accomplished. Es ist vollbracht. It first occurs as Jesus' last line. After Jesus says, I thirst, the evangelist describes the vinegar that Jesus had taken because they didn't even give him water. And then he says, it is accomplished. And in the manuscript copies that we have, which I believe are not in Bach's hand, there is a 7/5 figure written under the bass note that we hear here in the organ, right before Jesus sings Es ist vollbracht, with this descending stepwise motive, which Bach develops later. I like the use of that chord. I don't know why it has a 7 on it, but I love it.
It was a minor 7.
Yeah, it's a little unusual. I wasn't expecting.
This is a B minor 7 chord, right? That we're talking about?
Yeah, the one before Es ist.
Yeah, it's a little bit jazzy, kind of. You don't hear that sonority a lot in Baroque recitatives. The minor 4 with the minor 7 on it.
Really. And it's not like the note, the 7th of that chord, which is A, is any particular long tone in Es ist vollbracht. It's just a passing note.
Es ist vollbracht.
Classical harmony, this chord is 6/5, not 7/5, which would align with the accent on bracht of that. That would be a G sharp. It would be a 6 with a slash in it, which means sharp. A sharp 6th, a raised 6th interval from the bass note. This would be telling the organist or whoever it is, or whatever they're playing, depending on the performance that you listen to. In this case, organist, to play those particular pitches in the right hand above that bass note. And here, maybe from Bach, is just a very interesting choice. Maybe just for a little bit of extra color on a very dramatic moment. That's what I'm going with.
Es ist vollbracht.
The next time we hear the same Es ist vollbracht falling motif is just how you mentioned it in our last podcast episode, Alex, during the alto aria.
Es ist vollbracht.
We get the evangelist narrating that Christ bowed his head and passed away.
Und neiget das Haupt und verschied.
Which brings us to this aria, a freeze frame where we get a chorale and an aria simultaneously. Bach has been doing this since he was young. We hear some of it in some of his earliest cantatas, and they're the most, I think, impressive moments in some of these church works.
Lass dich fragen, teurer Heiland, lass dich fragen, teurer Heiland.
Moments of great complexity in something that doesn't really need the complexity in order to exist. And a lot of his contemporaries and those that went before him, like Kuhnau, who he succeeded in Leipzig, would write church cantatas and even a passion that were quite good but did not have any of this complexity. And Alex, you read the poetry of the bass aria last week. It includes the line Es ist vollbracht.
Ist vollbracht.
But something's different here. Something's different right off the bat. We have just witnessed Christ's death. And then a major key, almost contented, almost happy, upbeat, triple meter type of dance feel here.
Yeah, it's like tonal whiplash, basically.
The time signature 12/8 in a dance feel. Bum, 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 bum. And they do go quite slow in this performance appropriately. And like you said, tonal whiplash. It isn't in a strange key from where we were, but it is unexpected to have such a sunny sound here. There is a jumpy and active cello line right off the bat with ornamented trills.
Yeah, I really like this instrumental obbligato, because as we always say with arias, Bach always has an instrumental obbligato and at least one instrumental and at least one vocal obbligato line. And here the obbligato line is the continuo, which he does that sometimes. But as you said, there's also the added complexity of there being a 4-part chorale that is interspersed throughout this movement.
Mm-hmm. And it is that tune that we hear elsewhere, that we now know in English as Jesus I Will Ponder Now. But the verse here, as translated into English, is Jesus, you were dead and now live forever. But this follows the bass singing, My beloved Savior, let me ask you, since you have now been nailed to the cross, and you yourself have said, it is accomplished. There's Es ist vollbracht. Have I been set free from death? Asks the singer. And the singer is questioning. And there are a lot of question marks in this score. The chorus from the hymn, they sing, In my final agony of death, may I turn nowhere else but to you. And while they say, may I turn nowhere else, the bass singer is currently expressing, through your pain and death, can I inherit the kingdom of heaven? Another question mark. And here's the brilliance here. It's that it's not just Bach noticing that he could have a soloist singing at the same time as a choir is essentially singing a hymn. That is neat, and you would have to understand how to use counterpoint in order to do it.
Sure.
But that's not the masterstroke here. I think the masterstroke, on the one hand, the contrast between these very subtle, soft, long notes in the hymn and the almost dance rhythm of the aria. And then the way the text collides, because every time a line happens from the hymn, it is set against a questioning phrase from the soloist.
Yeah, it's theological counterpoint.
Theological counterpoint. I like that term.
It's like, you know how you have oblique motion in counterpoint or not just oblique motion, but just any kind of contrast between voices. What you already just said, the bass voice is a different style and feel and even meter than the chorale. But it's not just the music, it's the theological, the themes of the text are playing off each other like counterpoint. Like it's another layer of textual counterpoint that's happening in this. It's just stunning. It's not something that people talk about with Bach a lot because they talk about the musical counterpoint. And they do talk about, I'm not diminishing the status of the cantatas. I think they're very highly regarded, cantatas and passions, but I'm not sure people think about this side of that, which is the choosing of the text and exactly how it's placed. And in moments like this, how it's overlapped to great effect.
As an aside, this reminds me of a recent discussion we had about We Don't Talk About Bruno song from Encanto.
Oh, we don't talk about Bruno.
But we're not going to talk about it because...
We can't talk about that.
Okay, so moving on. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Bruno for a second.
No, you should talk about Bruno.
So, if I remember correctly, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote the song...
From the movie Encanto, yeah.
From the movie Encanto.
Yeah.
Took some inspiration from COVID isolation times, living with in-laws and a lot of overlapping conversation in the household. The point I'm trying to say is that the brilliant part to me of that song is the end, when all of the parts overlap and sing simultaneously. There's an organized chaos to it. Each is a part that we have mostly heard before in different parts of the song. And then the magic trick is revealed that they can all go together musically and create the controlled chaos that suits the narrative correctly.
That is a great moment, and I think is why that was the hit song from that soundtrack when it came out.
Yeah, and I think that Lin-Manuel Miranda was more interested in, I think he saw another song from Encanto, Dos Oruguitas, as the real accomplishment of that score. But I just remember just saying, like, it has counterpoint in it, and anything that has two or more things going on successfully in music, it gets a pass for me for anything else that I don't like about it. Like, I'll just love it. Although, that's a great song anyway. As you said, Alex, Bach is known to be a master of counterpoint, but doesn't that make you think of like the art of fugue or just fugues or canons or inventions? But it's more than that. It's like you said, text counterpoint, theological counterpoint, thematic counterpoint. And the brilliance continues. The bass singer gets to the line, "Through your pain and death, can I inherit the kingdom of heaven?" And the chorus is singing the line, "May I turn nowhere else?" The chord it lands on is outside of the key, so it seems like maybe it is going to go somewhere else. Is this really going to work? Question mark. And then the bass is left alone without those voices behind him as he finishes out this line. The kingdom of heaven, and then there's a question mark. I just love this musical question mark. Let's listen. Doesn't it seem like the singer stops short, stops early? That is the question mark in action. I think that's Bach's way of doing the question mark. The basso continuo, the cello, does kind of finish the answer by moving down to that low E and finishing that musical phrase.
But you're right. I mean, it's how you phrase a question, just in your speaking voice. It goes up. Is this the redemption of the whole world? Or I guess it's, can I inherit the kingdom of heaven? Heaven? Doesn't matter what the word is. The last word is always the one that goes up in the question.
Yeah, the contour is correct for question. And it's also da-da-dun-dun. And it needs to go to here. But it doesn't. And there should be something there.
And it's also off the beat. It doesn't land on a downbeat either. So it's not definitive. And it also, besides not landing on a downbeat, it doesn't even land on a strong beat at all.
It doesn't go ba-da-dun-dun-da.
Yeah.
But it also never gets just to the note that it's trying to get to either. So in 2 or 3 different ways, it has not been answered.
Yeah, and he does it again later with the next question.
Mm-hmm. The next question is this the redemption of the whole world? In German, the sentence ends with Erlösung da, and that sets up a rhyme for later.
Yeah.
And during that phrase, with the Welterlösung, that the whole world, redemption, we hear this somber hymn in the background, and that text at this point is, "May I turn nowhere else but to you, who have redeemed me. Oh, my dear Lord." Now the bass is getting to the end of the text here, with the final half of a line. Du kannst vor Schmerzen zwar nichts sagen. You can indeed not speak for anguish. Schmerzen is the anguish. Nichts is not, the not part of not speak. Okay, so that's being set up. Then, simultaneously, from the chorus we hear, "Give me only what you have won. For more, I could not wish."
Nicht sagen, vor Schmerzen zwar nicht sagen, doch neigst das Haupt, doch
That last line, "For more I could not wish," mir ich nicht begehre. You see it has a nicht in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is the stroke of genius, I think.
nichts ist
On that last line, that nicht does not line up with the other nicht like he could have done. But by the time the choir gets this far, to "give me only what you have won, for more I could not wish," the bass is now finally to the last line of text, which is, "Doch neigest du das Haupt, but you bow your head, und sprichst stillschweigend ja, and silently say, yes." At bar 37, the last line of the chorus, something brilliant and subtle happens. Mir ich nicht begehre, nicht occurs on a rest beat for the bass, on a strong beat, beat 3. On beat 4, the bass proclaims ja. So nicht and ja are superimposed in a very strange and interesting way. It's the first ya as well from the bass singer, from the solo, and that answers the question.
And it's actually the rest before the ya and the rest before the next ya right after are the only times that Bach uses a full beat of rest in the middle of one of the phrases in this aria.
Yeah, and it's during a choir phrase, so it has to cut through that as well. And then the single human, the observer of this frozen scene of Christ's death, says without the hymn, one last time, "But you bow your head and silently say, yes." The bass singer comes to this rest that's written after stillschweigend. Mm-hmm.
Ja, stillschweigend. Stillschweigend, ja, doch
There's the slightest pause at the colon after stillschweigend, and then one last ja. And in this performance, a slight space is put there, even though there is no rest in the score, for one last answer to this question.
Schweigend, ja.
And wouldn't you say, Alex, that in this particular recording by the Netherlands Bach Society, that after that last ya, which is so triumphant and affirmative, those last 2 bars of the end of the dance, which are a relief of this answer being yes, I just think that the confidence and sincerity and positivity in which these last few measures are played, plus that last ya, I think it's sort of just, it's just the embodiment of yes. You know, it's like E. Cummings type of yesness to it. It is yes, you know?
It is yes. Ja.
Schweigend, ja.
And I also like the way this singer is Drew Santini is the name of the bass soloist here. He also does the Peter stuff in the St. John Passion, which that's kind of cool that Peter, this isn't actually Peter, but that the Peter singer gets to sing this is actually kind of profound in another way. But anyways, Drew Santini, what he does at the end with that last ya is kind of cool too. As you mentioned, there's just a slight pause, and then he like kind of does a little head nod, like yes. And it's very effective.
Yeah, and it's sung almost with triumph, understated triumph, silently saying yes.
Yeah, these movements, it's like you said at the start of this episode, the whole affect of this feels a little odd in that it feels so happy and light and peppy. But do you know where else there is a lighter and happier, peppier 12/8 major key bass aria after Christ dies?
Dancing Sicilian type of 12/8 thing.
Yeah, do you know what I'm getting at?
I mean, just like this one, but in the other Passion.
But in the St. Matthew Passion, there is a similar thing.
Is it the one that we play for our intro and outro music?
It's the one that you hear every week if you listen to this show. Yes. And that is, of course, Mache dich mein Herz rein, which is about making yourself ready for Christ to be buried there in your heart.
But this one is more direct to Jesus, because as this frame is frozen, we're still taking the opportunity to ask him a question that he can't possibly answer because he's just died. And yet he does. Silently, we know the answer.
His head silently bowing in death is a nodding of the head, is an affirmative.
By the way, the punctuation at the end of the hymn stanza, which is used by Bach after "Give me only what you have won, O my dear Lord, for more I could not wish," is an exclamation point.
And now, here again is that ending, stillschweigend, ja.
Stillschweigend, ja, doch neigest du das Haupt und sprichst stillschweigend, ja.
If this introduction to the St. John Passion has inspired you to listen to more of this incredibly moving and powerful work, well, you're in luck. The Netherlands Bach Society has a superlative recording of this with great video too, great videography, and we will link that as we always do in our description. You can also find lots of episodes of us talking Bach. And we've talked about the St. John and St. Matthew Passions pretty extensively. We are on season 5, right? Mm-hmm. Is it 5?
It's 5.
We're now at the point where I'm starting to forget of this podcast. So we have a lot of backlog. And if you haven't listened to that stuff, well, it's all there for you. You can always subscribe so that you can get every new episode as it is released without having to download it manually.
So following the church year calendar, this Passion, which was performed on Good Friday, that will be this coming Friday if you listen to this episode in the week that it's released. And then comes Easter Sunday. So, Alex, what do we have next week?
Not only is this the right week for this piece of music, but it's also the right year in terms of the 300th anniversary of the St. John Passion, or at least the second version of the St. John Passion. There's a few different versions. So, listeners in Leipzig would have heard the St. John Passion on Good Friday, and then what would they hear on Easter? Just a couple days later, they would hear a brand new work by Bach, the Easter Oratorio. in 1725. So we'll talk about the Easter Oratorio, not exactly on the 300th anniversary, because Easter was at a different day back then, and plus the calendars are kind of wonky because of the way calendaring, well, it's complicated. But suffice it to say, it's basically the 300th anniversary of the Easter Oratorio, and we will talk about the last movement from that work.
Until next time, enjoy those moments. Yeah.
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 Yeah.